This Future Cities Africa episode is presented by Wesgro, the official tourism, trade and investment promotion agency for Cape Town and the Western Cape. Erika Hubert, Head of Export Promotion, Joshua Palm, Assistant Export Manager, and Jean Skeltema, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Wesgro, are my guests today. We discuss Made in the Cape, Innovation in Export Promotion. Erika, Joshua, Jean, welcome. Erika, can you explain exactly how Wesgro supports Western Cape exports?
Wesgro's export unit has two mandates: to support Western Cape business with exporting their goods and services to the rest of the world. And the unit also has a second and equally important mandate, and that is to support Western Cape businesses expanding their operations into the rest of Africa through our outward foreign direct investment mandate. And some of the key ways that the unit support Western Cape business is, first of all, we need to build an exporter ecosystem. And we do that through training, we do that through mentoring, we do that through hosting networking sessions and educational sessions to give exporters the tools that they need in order to not only start their exporter journey, but give them the support to continue their export journey. In addition to that, we have, which I think is really important, working with our research team, is export intelligence, including data and tools to understand trade agreements, to understand tariffs, export and import requirements, understand the potential market for your products. So we have a lot of exporters that will come to us trying to understand, I've got X product, let's say they've got a jam, they think this jam should go into Italy, but instead of just going on what they think this jam should be doing, our trade team as well as our research team can work together to support and leveraging trade analytics and trade data based on intelligence. We believe the jam opportunity from South Africa is not into Italy, but it might be into Australia, Ghana, and Singapore, just as an example. And then a key component of what the unit does to support Western Cape business is, of course, connect Western Cape exporters to international markets. And we do that through trade exhibitions, outward selling missions, inward buying missions, B2B matchmaking. We're managing trade leads, as well as our online marketplace, the Cape Trade Portal.
Erika, why is all of this important? Why are exports important in general? And why is it important for Wesgro to do what it does?
Overall, at a country, province, region, or city level, it grows output, it creates new employment opportunities, it drives economic growth, which ties in with Wesgro's mandate, and which is why we do what we do, is driving economic growth and creating job opportunities. And when economies grow, people have jobs, they've got higher income, we can invest in healthcare, public services, education, safety, and ultimately improving the living standards for all. So I believe that is why Wesgro and why we do what we do. But then in addition, on a company level, ultimately new markets means a larger customer base for exporters, which allows the business to increase production, increase sales, build those profit margins. It also reduces risk as the business is less reliant on its home market only should something happen in the domestic market. And we also find that businesses expand their current product as well as or their service offering based on needs from the international consumer, which might be different to the needs of your local consumer. And in general, we see business that have international exposure and also competing in international markets for that global customer. They tend to be a little bit more innovative. They learn to leverage new technologies. They tend to benchmark themselves against international best practice, which ultimately results in the business being stronger, more sustainable, and more resilient. But my colleague, Karen Bosman, provided quite a bit of detail on the benefits of exports in the Harnessing the Benefits of Foreign Direct Investment, Export and Tourism episode. So I'll defer to that session for a little bit more in-depth detail.
Erika, thank you. Joshua, when COVID happened and the world went into lockdown, how did this affect exporters and how did this affect your ability to facilitate exports from the Western Cape?
This was actually a very interesting one because, COVID kind of impacted every little bit of every ecosystem globally, different economies, different sectors. So we saw it from our public health administration all the way through to our education, all the way through to our SMMEs and business environments. So, I mean, it just literally infected everything. and especially so on the export side and our ability to provide that export support. I think it definitely played a massive impact in how we operate even now today, and also how businesses operate now. And one of the big things is because of the lockdown, there were so many different businesses that the employees couldn't actually go in. They couldn't go out to see customers, and that just slows business activity completely. So now you've got low production outputs, you've got a empty business that has to find a way to survive. It's very much of that, we're bleeding out here. And it's so difficult to actually get on site to try and fix and mend those gaps. So that was one massive area where just from not being able to be present really impacted production, business activity, and the economy as a whole. Another big one was restrictions on travel more for exports or export related as well. Because you're not able to travel, you can't actually build new customer base, new importer base for your business. So you can't actually increase your export yields. You actually now need to maintain it. And it's so difficult to maintain because you can't even travel your market to try and connect with your existing client database, your existing trade deals, export deals, and honor them. So that just causes even more clusters in getting barriers for growth, and as well as trying to retain what business you have left. Another big thing, and I think more directly to how we operate, was trade exhibitions were our biggest promotional element within the team, and also the biggest promotional element for different businesses and sectors. Now we've got restrictions on events, amount of people, and all these massive global trade shows cannot commence anymore. So now you have all these different businesses that have no platform to promote their goods. And now we do not have that operation anymore to actually help facilitate trade. So that was also a massive knock on, not just for businesses, but Wesgro's operations as well. So we really had to rethink and see how we can adjust to that. But I think for us, the greatest need and the biggest impact was actually the movement of goods. Exports needs to have the movements of goods in order to be effective. You now have air cargo that is actually not operating anymore because now there's restricted flight travels, movement of people. There's not any air cargo possibilities to get your goods out. And because of regulations and restrictions, the ports are now completely congested and they are unable to get their goods out. So you cannot export if you can't get your goods out of the country. So that was probably a massive barrier aside from not having low production output. That's also a massive barrier of the goods. And then lastly, for us, the two big ones for our operations were export training and network sessions. I mean, we can't rely on these gatherings anymore. So how do we actually reach and support, various industries, exporters, if we cannot actually meet them face to face? How do we train and develop exporters during COVID? I mean, I, it's still a difficult question to answer. And lastly, our entire process was halted completely. We cannot go to shows. We cannot promote exports due to the movement of goods being so restrictive, and we cannot develop new exporters because how can you enter a field where you can't travel? So these were all the knock-on effects that COVID had on exports, and it was incredibly difficult, and we are starting to see some recovery now, but it was a challenging time.
Thanks, Joshua. Erika, how did your team respond to the challenges caused by the pandemic?
It was an interesting time for us, but I think trade promotion agencies globally, because we all had to learn and adapt and find different ways. And I think we all, and definitely us, we've learned that technology is our friend, and that we had to digitize our offering to not only expand the support that we can provide to exporters, but also build resilience in future potential shocks. Just a couple of the components in terms of what we did and what we learned, and Josh touched upon it earlier, training and mentoring. So we had 3 or 4 export courses per year. Exporters had to travel into the city, then they had to book accommodation, and then we hosted a export training course and mentoring for a week. And all of a sudden, we couldn't do it. So immediately, we were able to digitize the offering. We did training online. And then all of a sudden, we realized we probably should have done this years ago. It immediately increased the size of exporters because we weren't limited by the room and how big it was. But then also more exporters from outside of Cape Town were able to join, especially some of our smaller exporters, because they didn't have to travel. There wasn't a cost involved to pay for accommodation. Um, And we realized it just opened it up. So even after COVID and after the restrictions were lifted, that is one of our support offering that remains virtual just because it works and it's better than what we did before. And then another component that Josh touched on was networking sessions. Again, a key function for an agency such as Wesgro is to connect stakeholders, to build that exporter ecosystem, to provide the information, to share intel, expertise, allow for peers to engage with each other. And we've done that all in person, which means everybody had to travel to Cape Town, a venue had to be booked, all of our speakers had to fly down, or we had to get local speakers. And then all of a sudden, with the restrictions in place, we just couldn't do it. So the rise of webinars, and that's not only us, I think the whole world's learned of webinars, and the value of webinars is, again, some of the side benefits. More people were able to join because you weren't restricted by the room size, and you're able to have speakers and panelists from across the world. So even it opened up that depth of intelligence and knowledge sharing, opened up completely. But then, of course, there is the fatigue component. People do need to be able to see each other in person. So even though they were really valuable, what we find as restrictions lifted, the hybrid component. The big component, and Josh touched on that, was our virtual export mission. So as Josh said, our biggest support was trade exhibitions, taking exporters into market, connecting them, connecting buyers and sellers, creating a platform in order for them to find that new customers in international markets to grow their business. And all of a sudden, we couldn't do it. Trade exhibitions weren't allowed. We couldn't fly anywhere. And we've realized there is technology out there that could support us. Was it perfect in the beginning? No, but it was really exciting for us to learn, to try working with our stakeholders, learning with our exporters that we support, because we do believe where we are today is much more sustainable than even pre-COVID by incorporating technology into the offering. So it started with, it was very simple. We have large group calls. I think we were one of the first in Africa to host a virtual mission, and it was a large group Zoom call with Botswana stakeholders and Western Cape stakeholders. It was buyers, importers, government talking together and understanding what can they do and connecting with each other and pitching their business. And of course, that then got a little bit more refined. We did one-on-one meetings, and that got more sophisticated, where we did a few missions where we pre-selected, or there was a group of buyers who then selected the exporters that they wanted to meet. So it was pre-matchmaking. Then they joined one call, and then we used the breakout room functionality. And it was like a speed dating. Everybody went into different rooms. They spent 5 to 10 to 15 minutes with each other. They came out, had a 3-minute break, and then went back in. And we successfully executed quite a few of that missions, which led to trade declarations. And I had a few comments where people said this is more efficient than a trade exhibition where you have to spend days and days and days trying to source leads, where within 3 hours, I believe we were able to host 80 or 90 meetings. So it was really effective making that initial contact. And then, of course, the rise of virtual platforms came. So we sponsored a lot of Western Cape companies to join virtual platforms or B2B platforms. We ourselves even hosted a virtual platform called Cape Agri Week, where we brought in 80 exporters, 6 export councils, and 200 or just over 200 buyers. And on that one day, through that platform, we were able to facilitate 500 B2B meetings. So we were pretty excited, again, by the scale which we can achieve if we leverage technology. But then even more exciting is when markets opened up, when some markets open up quicker than others. So then we learned there's hybrid missions where some people can attend in person and other had to dial in virtually. And I think that's probably where we're heading to in our offering right now is combining your in-person with your hybrid component. Some of the examples we did, I think one of the first ones was the hybrid South Korea mission. South Korea was open, but South Africa wasn't open. It was a wine mission, so we sent our wine samples to South Korea. A venue was booked, so South Korean buyers were able to attend in person, and our Western Cape exporters dialed in virtually. There was a big screen, and the South Korean exporters were able to do a live wine tasting with the South African exporters walking them through the wines. So we thought initiatives like that, where you don't always have to fly, you can send your product, that is a cost-effective way, but it also has the right impact. Then we had different examples of that. Of course, we learned maybe a big group experience is not what buyers or exporters particularly want, because you don't want to share your biggest trade secrets in front of a room. So we did refine that offering, and later on in the year we did the Poland wine mission, which is where we again sent our wines, but there were dedicated tables set up at the venue it was hosted, and each table represented a winery with their laptop, and the buyers came, everybody had a B2B schedule, and then you walk between the tables, spend half an hour at a table. You did a personal one-on-one wine tasting between the winery and the buyer. You can have the discussion, and then the buyer would get up, move to the next table, and you'll receive your next buyer. And again, so we were able to personalize that. And that's our role. We facilitate the conversation, and then it's up to the business in order to take that conversation further, connect with the buyer directly. Then we also realized there's different tools available, and how are we providing a more sustainable offering? What do we need to do to not only again scale what we're doing, but do it in a sustainable way? And thus we launched the Cape Trade Portal. It was launched in February 2022, and it's a virtual marketplace. It is a resource center, but it's also to us a central platform for the Wesgro export unit to work on, to manage our missions, to manage our trade leads, and for us to scale the support we're able to provide. So I'll hand over to Josh to give us a little bit of information around the conception, the history, where we are today, and what is the vision going forward.
Joshua, can you tell me more about the Cape Trade Portal and how it is positioning the Western Cape as a sought-after source market?
The Cape Trade Portal was something very special that we as a export unit decided to, let's put a lot of resources and a lot of thought into this. And the underlying thing is, how do we digitalize our service offering? How do we digitalize our operations so we can reach more people? We are going to be accessible 24/7, and we can actually have a great system in which everything is automated, dynamic, slick. And for us, the one thing that really solves all three and provides for all three of these different pillars is technology, digitalization, and thus the Cape Trade Portal was conceptualized to try and really take those three major elements and make them a reality. This was even a discussion pre-COVID, but I think the barrier for us was we were so comfortable in the traditional means of how we just operated, very physical, very practical, very in person, and that kind of put a bit of a halt to it. And also, I don't think a lot of people are ready at times for a digitalization overhaul. I think it takes a very big element to arise in order to really catalyze that and lead to an effective, digitalization uptake. And I think that catalyzing element was COVID. I think, now all of a sudden people pre-COVID that didn't even know how to work WhatsApp are sharing screens now on Zoom. So it just showed how people really had to pivot over into, a new type of a work environment through digital technology. And that's what the Cape Trade Portal was. That was the conceptualization. And again, it is to fulfill different type of need to a larger audience 24/7, and to really be able to help us in our services, in our service offering, and to digitalize that. And simply to be put, this Cape Trade Portal is a export marketplace. It's a place for businesses to upload their profiles so they can potentially meet new buyers, expand their market reach, have a feature out there that's marketed by Wesgro through the Made in the Cape campaign, which can really position us as a source market destination. Another element to this is our resource center, which covers really great key exporter resources that can be used, such as our research, statistics, trade barrier monitoring, etc., etc. So those are all functions on there. And then lastly, the Cape Trade Portal, not to say it's got sentience, but we really want it to be another member of our team. And that's what we're hoping it can fulfill. Our missions when we go into market, all of that is from and on the Cape Trade Portal. The exporters we assist and take with there on the Cape Trade Portal. You can always access the Cape Trade Portal like you'd access any one of us traditionally, as it were. And, that's definitely our vision and goal into the future with it. We are still building it out. There's a ton of development needs still needed, but we've seen a great success and uptake now, and we are really excited to see how we can benefit further from the future on it.
The Made in the Cape campaign leads into the Cape Trade Portal that Joshua just mentioned. Jean, can you tell me more about it?
So let's start right at the beginning. The Western Cape government strategic plan for the next 5 years identifies exports as key to growing the Western Cape economy. So when we set out 2 years ago to develop a unified exports brand for the province, not only was there strategic intent, but we also saw that there was a major shift in the way people are accessing products and services. So, in a world of faceless value chains, which is essentially, what it was, people were seeking authenticity, and this is around people, product, and place. So, this really where we started from when we began to develop the brief for the Made in the Cape campaign. But the challenge was twofold for us. The Western Cape is a largely services-led economy. So when we were putting together the exports brand, this needed to include both products and services under one umbrella, under one unified identity. And this was a large challenge for the team to see how we could put a unified message into market, one that the industry could also get behind. To avoid brand confusion and harness the power of the collective voice, a robust 360-degree campaign was developed. But that was not before we engaged with the industry itself. So for the brand story and the supporting collateral to be effective, we needed the export councils, the industry itself, and various sort of source inputs to direct and co-create the story and co-create the brief and really start to unpack, what is it about the Cape that is unique? What are the unique selling points? And some of the USPs that came out of this were sustainability, innovation, quality, resilience. These were terms that resonated with everyone and actually is a brand promise that we can deliver here in the Cape. So it started to form how we created the collateral and what the message was that we were actually going to tell the world about ourselves. So once we started to engage with our industry, our export councils, the trade team, the marketing team here at Wesgro, it really was about connecting place to quality and connecting the Cape to quality. And that is how Made in the Cape essentially was born, to meet the growing trend around the holistic combination in an environment of soil, climate, topography, and the soil of the producer, essentially. So that's sort of where we started. The brief was then developed. We then needed to move to, what does this look like? What is a common identity or an icon that everyone can get behind, when we send our message into market? And the King Protea came out as the lead icon on the Made in the Cape campaign. And there's a bunch of reasons why this is symbolic for us, not just as the Cape, but as Team South Africa. The 5 elements of the Protea represent the 5 products and service clusters that we use as our main proof points, as our real selling points into market. The Protea itself is a resilient plant. It is also the national flower, connected to South Africa, connected to origin. Quite important to think about, brands that have done this well in the past. If you look at a study that was done in the past, 3 bars of lavender soap were given to people and they had the choice of a no-name brand, a bar of soap from France and one from Provence, and they chose Provence. And so we needed to start thinking about visually, what does that look like? How do we have a inspiring story to tell visually when we talk about the Cape in terms of products and services? And so the beautiful Made in the Cape Protea icon was developed. And it's just one part of the white label collateral that's been developed in terms of the campaign. We then moved into a brand story and then needed to look at, okay, so we have this beautiful identity, but how do we take the products and services into market in what is essentially a new way of marketing this type of service? So previously, in an undigitized world, there would be a very different way to matchmake buyers and sellers. But what we've seen now is we have the innovation of the Cape Trade Portal. We've seen the global shift to digitization, and you now have a different way of accessing. And I think that is going to become even more important in the future in terms of the scale, scope, and speed that we can take products and services into market. And really the beauty of the Cape Trade Portal and the innovation that the team has, brought to fruition. So we needed to look at what is the newest way of attracting buyers to our products. So we embarked on using Google and LinkedIn through a targeted media campaign into the UK first. The UK is a very important source market for us in terms of products and services, but it is also a market that is familiar with us. So in many ways, some of the legwork has actually been done in terms of awareness, and we needed to move this audience from awareness to consideration right down to convert on the Cape Trade Portal. And so in terms of our collateral, there were very specific performance metrics associated with the collateral, but not just performance metrics. There was a balance between building long-term brand love around Made in the Cape and driving buyers in a targeted way to the trade portal to have those matchmaking sessions with Cape exporters and to generate leads for the unit itself. We've seen this method work before. We know that this is a much faster, much more targeted way into market. We are seeing the results of this effort. We have had more than 10 million unique users reached in the UK alone, driving 130,000 clicks to the Cape Trade Portal from the UK. We are using this as our springboard into the US later on this year. And we really don't see Made in the Cape slowing down. We see this as a new way of marketing the diverse range of products and services that we have here in the Cape, and that Made in the Cape will become a much loved brand and synonymous with the quality, the innovation, sustainability stories that we have here in the province.
And Jean, what is the future of Made in the Cape? And what is your vision for the next 10 years?
The future of Made in the Cape is that we want this to become a household name globally. We want people to instantly have recognition that Made in the Cape is synonymous with quality, trust, sustainability, resilience. We know that it takes 3 years to cement a brand in the minds of the audience. We know that the first 3 years is largely an education phase, and we're seeing that for what it is. We really do believe that the fruits of the Made in the Cape effort will come to bear 8-10 years down the line, when people are still asking for Made in the Cape and wanting that sense of region and that sense of origin that they're looking for.
Thanks, Jean. Erika, what lessons have been learned, and how has the pandemic changed the way that you operate and offer export facilitation services going forward?
Some of this we've touched on before, but I think our entire operating model has changed. It forced us to change. And I know it's a cliche, but it's working smarter, not harder. And I think this has really taught us that there's tools and technology that can support you so that you are able to expand the offering that you're able to provide to your clients, which in our case is Western Cape exporters. I believe in-person engagement is important, and it will always remain important, and it will always remain a key component of successful trade facilitation. But we have learned that by digitizing our offering and embedding a digital solution, we can scale what we do, exporters can scale what we do, and allow for a more sustainable operating model going forward. Just kind of to give two examples, for instance, is trade exhibitions are back and they will stay. It's an important part of trade facilitation. But to be smarter, why not do a virtual mission before the actual trade exhibition, where you're able to meet and connect buyers and sellers so that they can pre-vet themselves. So when they're traveling, when they're spending the money to go into market, the pre-vetting has already been made, and you know who you want to engage with and why you want to engage with them, really making the in-person conversation much more valuable because you've already eliminated those that wouldn't be a fit for your business. And then Josh touched on this, is for us, the Cape Trade Portal is our digital export offering, but it's also our way to support more businesses. If you traditionally, we go to a trade exhibition and we'll take 5, 10, 15, 20 exporters with us and we'll support them in market. What we're doing with the Cape Trade Portal is that Cape Trade Portal is going with each of our export managers into market, into each of our trade exhibitions and trade events that we're attending. So immediately, we're not only supporting the 5, 10, 15, 20 companies that we're joining in market, but we're also positioning the 1,000, 2,000, 300 exporters that we have on the portal. There's so many times when we're in market where let's pretend it's a tea show and the buyer is looking for, oh, I understand South Africa has amazing ostrich leather. You're not going to find an ostrich leather producer at a tea show, but by leveraging the Cape Trade Portal, we can introduce the buyer to the ostrich leather exporters in South Africa, and he or she can immediately connect with them and then kind of learn about the portal, put their own trade leads on the portal, and hopefully through that connect with Western Cape exporters quicker. So a big part of our team is really to position the Western Cape as a sought after source market. And we do that through supporting our Western Cape exporters by putting them in contact with the international markets, but we're also doing that by connecting with international buyers and introducing them. There is a place like Cape Town. There isn't a place like the Western Cape province. There is a place like South Africa, and it produces amazing quality products and services. And you can connect with those products and services through the Cape Trade Portal.
And in closing, Erika and Joshua, what is the Western Cape's competitive advantage when it comes to exporting?
South Africa and the Western Cape, we've got a long-standing export experience in many sectors, which has developed a strong presence in export markets and a recognition of quality and trustworthy products, and also enabled a tradition of export know-how and competitiveness in local export sectors. Just to give a couple of examples and to highlight what I'm talking about is, for example, South Africa is the second largest exporter of citrus in the world, with majority of that citrus coming from the Western Cape, really kind of highlighting the dominance in our agricultural exports. Interesting to note, we are also the second largest producer of catamarans in the world, after France, with most of those also produced in the Western Cape, really highlighting the manufacturing capabilities within the province. Looking in the Western Cape province specifically, we're the largest exporter of South African agriculture, exporting 55% of the nation's agri-products. And that includes 95% of South African wines is from the Western Cape, 75% of the country's fishing products exported through the Western Cape, 71% of all beverages is exported through the Western Cape. And it's again just really highlighting the expertise and the know-how and how the industry support each other. And then also it's driving trust amongst international markets and buyers because we are known as a trustworthy supplier that they can rely on. And also specifically with the agri products is something to mention is we're also counter-seasonal to the northern hemisphere. So when they don't have products or specifically fresh produce, then we're there to fill in the gap, which making our fresh produce and agri products particularly attractive. Something else also worth acknowledging is the growing consumer market in Africa, which is likely going to also the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is coming into fruition, is likely going to allow improved access for South Africans to the rest of the Africa market and vice versa as well. And again, we're also seeing that is starting to attract international investment into South Africa to give them access to the rest of Africa. So we're positioning ourselves as that gateway into Africa and let us help support connecting with the African consumer base. Talking about trade agreements, we have several agreements with Europe, with UK, with the SADC region. We've got trade preferences with the US, really making it able for our exporters to export duty-free into many of the key markets across the world. In addition, I talked about our manufacturing capability. We are a low-cost operating environment, particularly useful if you look at business process outsourcing or knowledge process outsourcing. Really, it's a sector that thrives in South Africa, but particularly in the Western Cape itself, given the skills and the expertise that we have locally. Cape Town is also the local tech hub in Africa, which creates a strong platform and structure to support our services exports. Agri dominates our export basket, but something that we need to recognize is the importance of the services sector to the Western Cape economy. If you think agriculture and manufacturing only represents around 20% of Western Cape's GDP and also around 20% of employment, whereas services represent 75 to 80% of both GDP as well as employment. So we are a services economy, and we have strong services exports, and that's something that we continue to want to kind of support to ensure that we drive that component of our economy as well.
You summed it up beautifully, Erica. I think maybe the only thing I would add, just on a softer, more philosophical note, was the Western Cape is so beautifully positioned and is such a stunning province. I mean, from the mountainside to the seas to the diversity of culture. When we think of competitiveness, we often look at our position globally, but internally as well. I mean, Western Cape is an attractive feature for tourism, attractive feature for people. So I think that also brings a lot of international interest into the Western Cape to experience its beauty and diversity. And that is then a knock-on effect for exports, for tourism, for investment, etc. So I think on a philosophical note, just the beauty, the diversity, and the culture of the Western Cape is, in my philosophical opinion, its major competitiveness towards globally. So I think that's something we also can't really take out of play. That's just me in a nutshell.
A big thank you to Erika Hubert, Head of Export Promotion, Joshua Palm, Assistant Export Manager, and Jean Skeltema, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at Wesgro, for such an insightful conversation around Made in the Cape, innovation in export promotion.